evening. This is Community Unity Now, the D Tycoon Show. And the host today will be Bill Morton, right, President of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce, and I am Trudy Leong, Administrator of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. Our very, very special guest today is Matthew McFarland, Project Director of the Bail Project's Community Release with Support program.
Welcome, Matthew. Could you tell us about what the Bail Project is, the mission statement, please?
Sure. We're a national nonprofit that provides bail assistance to people who are sitting in jails across the country who are indigent, right, and can't afford their bail. Our mission is very simple. It's clear. It's to end cash bail. Cash bail creates a two-tiered criminal justice system, one for the rich, one for the poor. We obviously, believe that people should be treated equal, right? Regardless of what they have in their bank account or how much money they have in their wallet. And right now, basically what happens is a judge sets a cash bail, and whether or not you have the money to pay that bail determines whether or not you'll go home. So I'm super glad to be joining you from Chicago, Illinois, where the Pretrial Fairness Act is about to go into effect in January of 2023. We'll no longer have to worry about the unfairness of the cash bail system in Illinois.
And could you please describe the Pretrial Fairness Act, please?
Sure. The Pretrial Fairness Act is part of a larger omnibus bill called the Safety Act. The Pretrial Fairness Act essentially deals with cash bail, right? It abolishes cash bail. It sets certain precedents for how people are treated, or what their experience is going to be as they're going through the pretrial process. Just a reminder, though, that we are talking about pretrial, right? So we're talking about people who have not been convicted of anything. So a lot of people, just for clarity, so people understand that when you're going back and forth to court during the pretrial process, you have not been convicted yet. You're simply fighting your case.
So innocent until proven guilty, but you don't get to go home unless you have the financial means.
That's correct.
And you're assisting with that.
Yes.
And you're a project director of Community Release with Support. Could you describe for us what that program is all about?
Sure. So Illinois being the first state to fully end cash bail, and again, that goes into effect in January of 2023, the Bail Project wanted to make sure that the Pretrial Fairness Act was supported and sustained, right, and that it lasts. So the Community Release with Support is an essential part of the programming that we offer all the way across the country, right? So in other jurisdictions, we bail people out, we provide them court reminders, transportation to and from court, and linkage to, social service providers. So that might be mental health treatment, drug treatment, housing, whatever the case may be. Remove the cash bail, and what you have left is Community Release with Support. And so what Community Release with Support is in Illinois or in Chicago is we're going to be assisting people who are released on their own recognizance, or I-bonds, as you might want to refer to them, meaning they have to post no bail. We'll be offering the same supports to the people, to those folks as the people we pay bail for in other jurisdictions across the country. So, transportation, court reminders to augment the current system that's in place in Cook County, and linkage to those critical social service providers, right, for people who want and need those services.
So in other words, you're saying that a lot of these people that are released on their own recognizance, they without these services, they might fall to the wayside. They might reoffend, or they'll have problems. And with your program, you're able to assist these individuals so that they'll return to court, and then they'll improve their lives.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as saying that without services that people will necessarily reoffend or become reincarcerated. Remember, the foundation of the presumption of innocence is the bedrock by which we operate off of. And so to assume that just because somebody's in the pretrial process that without services or something that they're going to reoffend, we don't even know if they're guilty in the first place, right, of the current allegation that they're going back and forth to court for. However, I will say that somebody like myself who has been impacted by the criminal justice system, there's a lot of folks who will greatly benefit by these services, right? Because it's more about just even coming back and forth to court. A lot of it has to do with the real potential of changing the trajectory of somebody's life. And that's what this program is about.
You also help people find jobs while they're in your program. When people are in the pretrial state, how long is an average time for them in that state, pretrial, and so that during that time they would even acquire a job with your help?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the length of a case depends on, there's a lot of factors that come into play. The seriousness of the case, the allegations, the evidence and discovery that's brought forth before the court. There's a lot of factors. What I can tell you is over the past 3 years in Chicago, the typical average length of a case that we saw was around 9 months. That could vary, though. We have some that, would go on for a year plus. We'd have some that would be resolved in, a month or two. It's amazing that when people are not forced to be in custody, that they tend to, a lot of times, fight their cases longer, right? Because they're able to do so from a position of freedom. Cash bail is kind of the oil that keeps the plea bargaining machine running, right? And so all too often what happens when jurisdictions are using cash bail, people will take a plea bargain, right? Just to get home or get home sooner to their families. And so when you remove cash bail or pay the bail for an individual, you'll find out that they're not as quick, right? To say, hey, I'm guilty even when I'm not, or that I did this when I didn't. And so they'll typically fight their case to try to get the best either deal possible, or, if they are truly innocent, which we find across the country that anywhere between 20 and 57% of our cases, depending on the jurisdiction, are either dropped or people are found not guilty. There's a variety of things, but it can be as high as 57% in some jurisdictions. So when people aren't forced to sit in jail simply because they don't have the bail money to get out, they're less likely to accept a plea deal, right, or a conviction, which ultimately has other collateral impacts and consequences on their life.
There is also an issue about electronic monitoring in the Pretrial Fairness Act that needs to be addressed. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, what I can say is that the electronic monitoring is something that a judge determines whether or not somebody's going to be on electronic monitoring. And that is something that the sheriff, Tom Dart of Cook County, sheriff in Cook County, administers. So we don't really have much to do with that. I guess what I can answer as it relates to electronic monitoring is the changes that have gone into effect in the current law. So it's one part of the Pretrial Fairness Act that's actually gone into effect is the way we handle electronic monitoring in the way, the way people have to respond when they're on it. And one of the main changes I can tell you is now there's mandatory movement for people to go to and from work and employment. So they can now go to job training, they can go and get health care, they can do those critical things, right? That incapacitating somebody temporarily used to prevent people from doing. So, it's a much looser process now. I wouldn't say looser, but it certainly allows for more movement and more access to opportunity for people who are on it.
In other words, you're saying that before the Pretrial Fairness Act, there was electronic monitoring as well. But during that electronic monitoring, there wasn't as much freedom of movement, such as to go to work or to school.
That is correct. Yeah. Yeah. So you had less movement, less opportunity to go find a job or keep your job. And usually the judge would, it was something you have to be brought up during a bond hearing. You would request movement, and a judge would allow you to do that. Now with the PFA, part of the implementation and the new law requires that people are allowed those movement opportunities.
What happens if someone is with your program, Community Release with Support, and they do find a job? Do they have to notify the judge that could you change the terms of my electronic monitoring now, because now I have a job and I need to be at a certain place at a certain time? And the schedule changes every week too.
Yeah, that's a really great question. We're actually working on the PFA implementation process and what that communication is going to look like. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe we're there yet. What we're trying to determine now is, does the judge still say, okay, have this movement? Is it something that the sheriff's office that we communicate with the sheriff with? We're still trying to figure that out. It's one thing to enact a law, it's another thing to implement it, right? And so there's a lot of stakeholders that are coming together now talking about what those processes and what the logistics are as it relates to the full implementation of the law.
We did have a question from a community member about this too. He was asking about bail bondsmen. So since the Pretrial Fairness Act comes into effect, then is there still any need for bail bondsmen in Illinois?
There is not, and there hasn't been for some time. It has not been legal for the bail bonds industry to operate in Illinois for years. So they operate in other jurisdictions. Illinois is just not one of them.
Oh, okay. Could you just explain really quickly how they were abolished, the bail bondsmen?
Well, it's just I can't recall what the law is, but I know that at one point they were outlawed in the state of Illinois and have not been operating in some time. What I can tell you what a bail bondsman does, right? A bail bondsman basically does the same thing that we do, with a couple of exceptions. One, they charge money for their services, right? And so when they're bailing somebody out, somebody comes and says, "Hey, I got my grandson or my granddaughter, and I want to bail them out," and the bail bondsman will typically post the bail and charge a fee to that family member, right, or the person who's incarcerated in order to post that bail. In return, that person gets out, right, and as long as they make all their court dates, the bail bondsman industry gets their money back, and then they charge the person who asked for the support a fee. What they don't do, though, right, is they don't provide the services and supports that an organization like the Bail Project does, right? So there's no linkage to jobs. There's no, let me help you get housing. If you need treatment or substance use counseling, we're going to link you up to it. They don't do any of that. The bail bonds industry is a very large, powerful industry, and it operates in a lot of jurisdictions across the country. Illinois is not one of them, thank goodness. But they operate, and it's a big money grab for them, right? The Bail Project is a nonprofit. We don't charge for our services at all. Our services are completely free to the people that we offer them to. And so there's some critical differences between the two, but in Illinois, the bail bonds industry does not operate. Mm-hmm. It's a great question, though.
What are some examples of social services and community resources that partnered with you in your community release support model?
Yeah, I mean, it's another good question. So housing, employment, we partnered with the Safer Foundation to provide employment and training opportunities for our clients. Another partner of ours is Treatment Alternative for Safer Communities. It's an acronym is TASK. I think we talked about this in a previous interview. They are essentially kind of a case management organization that they kind of triage our folks as they're coming out of jail for us. But in this new partnership, this new program, this $2.9 million grant is to the Lawndale Christian Legal Center, who will ultimately be the intermediary here and the people that are providing the services directly to people who are coming out of Cook County Jail. They will be the intermediary, linking them to places like Safer Foundation or TASK or Target or whatever organization that they're pulling together this partnership. It's about building collective capacity throughout the city of Chicago to provide all these different wraparound services. So, but basically, just I guess to get further into it, it's employment, it's mental health treatment, it's housing, it's healthcare. It's a variety of those critical things, the same things that you or I would need, right, to succeed in life or to get by.
Two questions. Where did the $2.9 million come from, that grant?
Well, it came from the Bail Project directly. But ultimately, if you were to trace it all the way back, it came from a lot of folks, people like you and me, right, who see the cash bail system, right, and how it marginalizes people of color, Black and brown communities, and how it's a major driver of mass incarceration in our country, right? And so we have a lot of people that donate $20 or $50 to the Bail Project a month. Some people will give a one-time donation. Every dollar, though, has always gone directly into helping people, helping bail our folks out. This, considering that the Pretrial Fairness Act goes into effect in 2023, cash bail is no longer an option, but we don't want to leave folks hanging, right? We still know that there's this infrastructure of support that's going to be needed for this new law, right? To not just go into effect, but to stay in effect, right? And so, like I said, not everybody will need or require services, but for those that do, people like myself, those services are critical. And I just want to I'm sorry, I'll hold this up just so you can see. I myself am a recipient of services, right? Community-based services. And just to give folks a look at the difference, right? This was me back in 2015 in December when I picked up my last case for possession of a controlled substance. I was an IV heroin addict and a crack addict, and my habit costs nearly $1,000 a day. I was cycling in and out of the criminal justice system, and it wasn't until I was offered an off ramp, so to speak, right, and get treatment and services in the community that I was able to turn my life around. And I join you today from a home that I purchased 3 years ago, and I've since won full custody of my daughter. I'm employed full time by the Bail Project, and I oversee this project of community release with support. So it's very near and dear and personal to me, to be able to provide these services to a wider swath of people that are going through the pretrial process.
You mentioned before that you're also in charge of granting money. So was it the Lawndale Christian Legal Center that applied for a grant with the Bail Project, and you were part of the people who were responsible for making the grant?
Yeah, that's correct. We had a lot of great proposals that came in, but when we, at the end of the day, what it came down to is, for us, I think the committee, being somebody that sat on that committee, that approval committee, I think what won the award for Lawndale Christian Legal Center is their hyper-local approach, and the fact that they are literally located on a side street in North Lawndale. It's a building in the middle of a residential block on a side street in North Lawndale. They are super committed and have been committed to providing holistic defense and wraparound services to people who are going through the same process. They've been doing it for 12 years and have had remarkable outcomes as with respect to their services. So for us, kind of at the end of the day, it was like we had a lot of larger pitches, some big pitches from big organizations, but we fell in love with the way Lawndale Christian Legal Center has this hyper-local approach. They have a history of helping young folks, right, going through the criminal justice system, providing holistic defense, right? So it's not just meeting the legal needs, right, of their constituency, but also the social needs of their constituency. And that's what community release with support is, right? It's not just about helping people get back and forth to court, but it's also meeting them where they may be lacking, so whatever needs they may have socially, right? Whether it be drug treatment, housing, employment, and the like.
Could you describe a little bit for us what kind of resources do you have for housing?
Right now we're working with a variety of organizations. I don't want to be too quick to name them directly. There will be a press release coming out very soon about a new partnership that we're having that will provide long-term permanent housing for the people that are coming through our system. More to come on that. I don't believe I'm at liberty at this time to name that organization, but we're open to building the collective capacity. And, I would ask that anybody watching this, if you're familiar with anybody that currently provide, housing is always a tough one. It's very expensive. And it's tough, right? Especially when you're talking about people with records. Landlords are sometimes hesitant to give opportunities to people who have a criminal background or are going through the pretrial process. Our plans here are to get more folks to look the other way, knowing that these supports, these critical interventions are in place for our clients, right? And help us to house more and more people. Because that really is about community safety, right? Our community, when we talk about community safety, we all too often separate the people that are going through pretrial, right, with people who are living in the community. They're literally the same people. So if we house people and we provide the opportunities where they don't currently exist, people are less likely to continue to recycle or recidivate in and out of the criminal justice system. So
you have many different benefits and services, including housing, healthcare, mental health treatment, and employment. Do you also do things like expungement and other services as well?
Yes, we have. Right now we're in the implementation phases. We go live in April, but I can tell you that there are some, we do have some partners that are going to be offering expungement and sealing. I'm sure you're familiar, it sounds like you're familiar, Bill, with the new sealing expansion law. Well, it's not really new anymore. It passed in 2017 that expanded the number of individuals that were eligible to have their cases sealed. I think there's 4 categories that are ineligible. You're going to put me on a spot here. I'm going to try to name them, but I think they're DUIs, cruelty to animals, domestic batteries, and there's one other. But the vast majority of cases now, after a 3-year waiting period, are eligible to have their cases sealed. In addition to that, if people, the new law, the seal and expansion law that went into effect in 2017, if people complete a vocational training program while they're still serving their sentence, be it probation, parole, or supervision, they're eligible to have that 3-year waiting period waived. So they can literally apply to have their cases sealed, right, the day after they get off paper. And that's a game changer.
Do you have a lot of individuals who have succeeded in doing that?
We do, yeah. In my former employer at Safer Foundation, we helped hundreds of people. They're still doing it. I think Safer is one of the organizations that kind of leads the charge there. It's critical that you package these things together, right? Not like employment opportunities and training with sealing and expungement, and then of course an opportunity, right, which is what community release with support is, to take those critical interventions and swim upstream with them, to not just help people, right? Because typically we're having these conversations about people that are coming out of prison. What this is, right, is an intervention and an opportunity to prevent people from ever having to go there in the first place. So that's what our hopes are for community release with support. But yes, there's all kinds of opportunities relates to sealing and expungement with the new laws that have gone into effect in Illinois.
For individuals that get into this pretrial phase and that are not in Cook County, what happens if they want these services as well, but there isn't a community partner of the Bail Project in that area to support them? Is there any way that they could get in touch with you, and then is there any way that you could still help them?
Yeah, I mean, I would make this my formal invitation for any legislator or stakeholder throughout the state to contact me directly if you'd like to learn a little bit more about how to implement community release with support in your given jurisdiction. My name again is Matthew McFarland. I'm the project director of community release with support, and I can be reached via email at Matthew M at bailproject.org. I'd love to have a conversation. I wish that we could serve everybody throughout the state. We can't, but what we can do, right, is not hold our cards too close to our chest. This is a recipe that we're willing to share, and we want to offer to other jurisdictions as well. So I welcome any opportunity to talk about how we do our asset mapping, how we create this infrastructure and how we build this out across the state, for sure.
What is asset mapping?
Asset mapping is it's building collective capacity. So you have to look at where your assets are. In Chicago, we're pretty resource rich and heavy. I mean, we have organizations that provide employment services. We have organizations that provide drug treatment, mental health, and housing. When you get into the more rural areas of the state, there's less funding available and there's less of an infrastructure. So asset mapping is basically kind of looking at what services exist across the state, and how can these complement, right, community release with support model? How do we build our collective capacity? Because no one person is going to be able to do it all. These services are a lot of times already exist in the community, but if not, then we need to have real conversations about how do we implement these, how do we fund these so that they can exist in our given jurisdictions, right? That's the game changer, and that's what we're hoping to accomplish.
Are you working with any legislators in other areas now that trying to implement the program in areas other than Cook County?
We're getting more and more conversations started by going on TV shows like this and talking to the press and media. As word gets out, people, we're the first people to do this, right? Like, not only are we the first state to end cash bail, but the Bail Project and Lawndale Christian Legal Center are the first people, right, to step up and say, we need to implement this infrastructure and spend this money. The Bail Project is investing $2.9 million over the course of 2 years, but that's just a start. The purpose of this is to pilot this, right, and to show that this works, right, and then offer that recipe to other jurisdictions so that they can implement it too.
And could you give us contact information or like your website if people want to learn more?
Sure, it's bailproject.org, just BAIL project, Or if you'd like to go to our partners at Lawndale Christian Legal Center, you can reach them at lclc.net, I believe, is their website. And, again, I welcome any conversations. If you're a service provider in a rural jurisdiction, or, you're a state representative, please reach out to me. I can put you in touch with some of the amazing folks out here, stakeholders out here. And again, we're willing to share this, this information and this program with whoever will have it. My contact information, Matthew M, 2 T's, MATTHEWM @bailproject.org.
So some community members might say that there are some of the pretrial released individuals might commit crimes, etc. But I know that they're presumed innocent until proven guilty. But is there a way to address those cases in which the pretrial released individuals do get rearrested without affecting those whom programs like community release with support benefits? Could we address that problem, but still keep the benefits, and so that the benefits are not affected?
Yeah, that's a great question, Trudy. But the danger there is, right, we start to infringe upon our constitutional rights, right, when we start to determine who's guilty and who's not. What I can tell you is, everybody deserves their fair day in court, and that's what this is really about. I always take caution when we conflate ending cash bail with community safety, because again, people that are going in and out of our criminal justice system aren't terrible people. Some people are just like you and I. A lot of people are just like you and I, right? They work, they have families, they do this, that, and the other. And by simply letting them out of jail so they can fight their cases from a position of freedom doesn't necessarily equate to a public safety argument. What I can tell you is this: what we can't do is continue what we've been doing, right? The United States of America locks up more people than any other country in the world. Yet we still see, right, violence, we see disinvestment, we see food deserts, and we wonder, why are these people, why is this happening? And we refer to them as these people, and we like to point the fingers, right? But the reality of it is that, we're talking about, like, right now, some of the argument and some of the narrating has been around, ending cash bail is why the violence in Chicago is increasing, but the law literally hasn't even gone into effect yet, right? And if incarcerating people pre-trial prevented violence and prevented, recidivism and things like that, we wouldn't be having this conversation today, right? It doesn't. We know that because we've always done it. We've incarcerated more and more people than any other country in the world, and yet here we are, right? We still have the same problems. So my argument is that we need to disinvest in mass incarceration and reinvest in people, right? People like me, so that they can wake up with a purpose the way I did one day. And I haven't found the need to carry a gun, have a drink or a drug since then, right? Since that day I found my purpose. And that's what this is about.
Well, that's a good way of answering the question, because we only meant the ones that get rearrested. You were getting rearrested before, but then you sought help, and then you agreed. You chose to get help, and then you changed.
Yeah, as long as we as a country continue to criminalize things like addiction, poverty, and mental illness, we'll always be in this cycle, right? There'll be a certain percentage of folks like me, who will cycle in and out of the criminal justice system, right? It's not until people like myself are offered these off-ramps or these amazing services that we're able to kind of pull our life together. So ending cash bail is the right step. It's a step in the right direction, but it's not the only step. There's a lot more work that has to be done. As long as we can, like I said, as long as we continue to criminalize poverty and mental illness, we're still going to have this cycling of people kind of coming in and out of jail, when we can literally solve the problem by investing in people, right, and in our communities.
Investing in mental health centers and so on and so forth.
100%, yep, 100%.
Well, Matthew McFarland, Project Director of the Community Release with Support Program at the Bail Project, thank you so much for joining us on CAN TV's Community Unity Now, which is the D. Tycoon Show. And thank you so much to our founder, Catherine Brown D. Tycoon, for this awesome platform in which we could present what the Bail Project and the Community Release with Support Program is doing. This is Bill Morton, my co-host, the president of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce, and I am Trudy Leung, administrator of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.